In this short demo, we're going to have a look at the playback of sound within Android. In particular, we will stream some music. For example, we could use that for background music, and we will trigger the playback of a sound effect. So in terms of the demo code that was sent out, there's a couple of ones we're interested in, both inside the audio folder. One's called Media Player Test Fragment and the other Sound Pool Test Fragment. And we will just fire off an emulator so we can have a look at how they run. In both cases, the activity that they're attached to is the default simple one. It's not going to do much. And the Media Player Test Fragment is the first one we'll have a look at. It's going to load in a MP3 file. That's going to be a remarkably short MP3 file that it will play back through streaming, and we'll loop on that playback. So we will repeat it as we go through. For the sound pool test, this particular one we will load in another MP3 file just as a sound clip. We're going to set it up inside a sound pool so we can support a specified number of playbacks of that particular element. So we'll use both of these here. So we'll have a look at the Media Player Test Fragment first of all. So it is a type of fragment. Things we have within this, we have a media player instance, and that's really the most important bit of this. It's going to be the thing that will enable us to stream back and to play our music. And because we are streaming, and you can be streaming from different sources. It may be an audio file that is local, part of the application package. It may be one that we're streaming from an online source. So certainly when we're thinking about using the media player, there is a small period of time, or a period of time needed to prepare it, to get it ready for streaming, to make that initial connection and to populate buffers and things like that. So that's why within the media player, we're going to have a flag that will tell us whether or not that media is available. Now, we'll just run the demo and we'll have a look. I'll turn the orientation around. So if I run this. Now, other things we have in this here, we have the onCreate view is simply going to inflate a very simple piece of XML layout. The music things I'll talk about in a second. Then we're going to have a chunk of code here that creates the media player, that loads in some media and gets it going. The rest of the things, if we resume or if we pause our entities, then we will either resume or pause the playback of the audio as well. So that's a sensible thing to do. So if the user navigates away from the application, we don't want it to be sitting playing music in the background. Let's see. So this is fired up. So we will. I'm going to turn the volume up, so we'll probably hear this. We will do the first one, the media player test.
Hello? Anyone out there? Hello? Anyone out there? Hello?
So in this one here, you had the hello, anyone out there clip was basically what we were streaming, and doing that repeatedly. And of course you could replace it with some more meaningful music. If I did the sound pool test, so this one here says tap screen to trigger explosion. So if I tap the screen once, we have the explosion sound again. And if I did it a couple of times, so in that sense, I'm determining through an interaction with this when that sound gets to be triggered. But effectively, yeah, that's all of these two demos do. They play back a bit of sound and not much more beyond that. So media player test then. What do we have within this here? We've got our media player, and I've mentioned we have to have a flag that tells us when we can start playback, because depending on how we're connecting it. Inside the onCreate view, we do a few things. So this is an important thing. We go to the activity and we are setting the volume control stream. So what this says is that if the user interacts with the volume buttons on their device, they change the volume, then that is something that we want to pick up in terms of streaming music, and we'll then want to change the volume with which we stream music. That's making a link then. It's saying that we should pay attention to any changes of the volume of the music that the user puts in. Now you don't do this, again it won't change it, so this is sort of really respecting the what the user is trying to indicate by way of playback. We're then creating a new media player, and we've got a try block, so we're going to try to open and start streaming music. We have to try it because down at the bottom we have a catch block, and if we have any issues with this, we can't find the media file, or we can't stream from the media file, or there's a breakdown in the communication, an exception will be thrown, and in this case we're just simply outputting some error message to the text view to tell us that we couldn't do it, we had a problem. Inside the try bit, this is where, if you like, all of the hard work happens. The first thing we have to do is we have to try to load in the file. And we're going to go to the Activities Asset Manager, which is really more like an asset loader. And in the Asset Manager, we're going to ask it to open a file description. So open FD. Now a file description will tell us important information about that file in terms of its size, its location, stuff like that. So it describes the file. And I get out of this an asset file descriptor. And what I'm loading in is the sort of the coach, hello, anybody out there, audio. So we open up a file descriptor to that. Having done that then, I go to my media player that I've created, and I'm setting its data source. So this is where it is streaming its media from. And I have to give it some information, and all the information I get through my music descriptor. So I tell it whereabouts the file is that it's going to be streaming from. I tell it the start offset of the audio within that, and I also tell it the length of the audio within that. So that's all the information that thing needs to be able to take in a stream of data from that particular file. I do have other things. I can set up looping to say that whenever you get to the end of that playback, start again from the beginning. And I then ask it to prepare itself. So the notion of prepare, it says here, prepares the player for playback synchronously. So we will try to open up our connection, we also parse the data, we'll load it in, we'll make sure it's in the right format, we'll populate our buffers. We're getting to the point where we can then actually trigger playback of that audio. Now, this is a synchronous message, so again we can have some notion there of sort of blocking until that is done. After that is done, we say that we do have some media available, so we set that to be true. At this point we know we can actually commence playback. We've loaded the thing in, it's all up, ready to go. So that's all that we have within our onCreateView method by way of setting this up, loading it in, and preparing it ready for playback. The other two messages where actually we commence or stop playback, they're linked into the onResume and onPause setup. So onResume first of all, so remember, we create our application, we start it, and then we resume it. That's the sequence we go through in the life cycle. So whenever we resume our app, which will be after we've created it, we do a check here to make sure that we actually have the thing available, that it's been loaded in and we're ready to go. And we ask the media player then to start playback. The onPause bit is where we are exiting out or moving to the back. So in this case, and again you can see in both cases here, we're calling the superclass to handle things neatly. If we have media available, so it has been loaded in, then we go to our media player and we ask it to pause, to temporarily halt playback. Now that will work if we pause and resume, and we'll start and stop the audio. There's an additional check here that we may be pausing because we're going to stop and ultimately be destroyed. And we can actually get a trigger in to see if that is the ultimate goal of the change in state. And we go to the activity and call the isFinishing method, which will tell us if that activity is finishing up. And if that is the case, we want to go to our media player and to tell it to also finish up. So it's important that it frees up its resources. So we call the stop method, Then we call the release method on the media player, and that's a clean way then of exiting out as that activity itself exits out. The other test we have is the sound pool test fragment. So again, it's a fragment. Inside this, as with the media player, we're going to have a sound pool. And the sound pool will be set up under the notion that we have an audio file that we have within the sound pool, and we can then have a number of simultaneous playbacks of the audio in the sound pool. In this case, we're supporting up to 20 simultaneous playbacks. So when I clicked on the screen and twice and you had sort of 2 explosions going, I could be clicking as frantically as I can and have up to a maximum of 20 simultaneous explosions happening. Now, similar to the previous one, we are going to try to load things in. It can be an error-prone process. We may not be able to do it. So I'm going to have here an integer which contains the ID of the sound effect that we've loaded in. Normally it's a positive number, so I'm going for -1 as my way of indicating that I've yet to load the thing in, or it hasn't managed to get loaded in. We have our onCreate view. So similar with the other one, this is where we're going to do all of our setup. In this one here, we inflate our XML, so it's just simply the screen saying you'll click anywhere on this. We get the text view that says click anywhere on it, and we're going to set up a click listener on that. So that's when I clicked on it, we want some activity or action to happen, and the particular action or activity we want to have happen is we want to play back that sound. So we've got a test there to see, is the sound available? That's the first one, because it may not be. If it is, we go to the sound pool, and I'm asking it to play, and I pass in the particular clip that I want it to play. Now, for this demo, we've only set up our sound pool with one sound effect. If I had a more sophisticated game, I might, for example, put 5 or 6 different sounding explosion effects within it. And then I can pick one of those effects maybe at random, or I could have a particular one tied into a particular circumstance. But in this case, we're populating our sound pool with a single entity, so there's not really much there. But I tell it the sound, the ID of the sound that I want to play, is stored within the sound pool. And you have some other properties there for, if I do the thing up, so sound ID, left volume, right volume, so they're both set to 1 at the minute, so it's going to be maximum volume from both channels, but if you wanted to have it panning from left to right, you could do so. The priority, in terms of if this is more important than other ones within the pool, if it's going to loop, not going to loop, and then sort of the playback rate for this. So these are all things that can be varied to do it. So for example, a playback of 1 means playback at the original speed. If I change it to 2, playback twice as fast. 3 means, or 0.5 at half the speed. So you can use this here to vary the clips. I could have a small variation in the playback of the sound. Sometimes it's a bit longer, a bit shorter. Again, this helps take a single clip and to put a degree of variability into it, so it sounds different, more dynamic, a bit more live to the player. And that's really, so that, this is where we do our playback. It's linked into the click listener, and it is as simple as that. Now, the bit we have at the bottom is actually populating the sound pool. So we sort of looked at defining it, triggering things from it. We've now got to look at how we populate it. So what we do down here, well, first of all, we do our usual thing with the activity that we want to indicate that if the user changes the volume on the device, then we want to respect that within our activity to change the volume of the things we're playing back. We've got our new sound pool. Now you'll see here that this is deprecated. So I think it was API 21. It was around API 21 that they put in a sound pool builder, but this has been set up to work from API 14. So depending on which version of Android you are using, you may want to create a sound pool builder where you can sort of specify a few properties and it'll create it. In this one here, I'm using the old version where you specify the maximum number of channels, simultaneous playback channels. You say the purpose of it, streaming music, and I can't remember what the last 0 is. Let's see if it tells us. Well, it doesn't tell us what it is. And there's a 0 at the end for some mysterious reason. You can sort of look up what the description is. So that creates our sound pool. We're then going to try to populate that sound pool, so it might be problematic. So if we have an IO exception, we're going to catch it down at the bottom. Beyond this, similar pattern to before, we're going to go to get our asset manager for loading in assets, and we're going to get a file descriptor, in this case to our explosion MP3 file. We then go to our sound pool and we ask it to load in that particular descriptor, and then we have a priority at the end if you have multiple ones you're sort of going to be setting up for it. So we're asking it to load in, it'll be the explosion MP3. That then gets to be added in, or tries to be added into the sound pool. And we could populate our sound pool with as many things as we want. The thing to remember from this is that when we add something into the sound pool, you can see here for the explosion FSX ID, we get back out an integer. The sound pool says, okay, you've asked me to add in some audio, that's fine. Here's an integer. And that integer is the ID of the sound that was added into the pool. And we need to collect that and to keep it, because if we want to play things back, we're going to have to hand in the integer ID of the thing that we want to play back. So it is important we retain that. That's more or less it. Doesn't do really much beyond that. In this sense here, we don't need to worry about pause or resume because it only triggers the sound clip whenever we click on it. But we check to see if this ends up being destroyed. In that case, we want to release the sound pool because that's a good, safe thing to do. That's really all I want to say about having a look at an Android, how we can stream music or how we can trigger the playback of audio clips. It is reasonably straightforward. I suppose where it gets interesting is in terms of how you use this and the flexibility and the types of things you put in. Certainly, in terms of playback of sound clips, there are a lot of things you can do to give sort of a rich oral landscape to the game. So that's it for this one.